Hey folks, Dave Lentz here. The video you are about to see is vitally important. Why? It's because criminal defense attorneys play a crucial role in maintaining our constitutional rights. Criminal defense attorneys are the primary guardians of our rights under especially the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments of the United States Constitution. The right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government, the right not to be forced or coerced into a confession, and the right to have legal counsel. All of these rights and more are protected primarily by criminal defense attorneys, and they help to assure the government is a government of laws and not of men. They are fundamental to our very democracy. And so when you watch this video, consider the negative effects of not giving criminal defense attorneys the financial support that they deserve to protect these rights. Thanks for watching. And you want to stick around because at about the 29-minute mark of this video, I actually propose a solution or a big step towards solving this problem. That's at the 29-minute mark. Thanks for watching.
Okay, folks, this video is about a subject that I've written about. Here in 1 second, we'll start the video, but it's about, I call it bad lawyering for the poor and criminal justice. And really, this is about how monetary, economic considerations, namely the money, play a large role in explaining problems with the ineffective assistance of counsel that poor folks get in. I'm going to talk here exclusively about criminal cases. This has nothing to do with civil cases. But indigent, namely poor defendants in criminal cases, often get poor legal representation, and it can lead to convictions and bad results, which of course is a very bad thing to have happen because it represents a huge injustice. Anyway, before we start the video, please, we do take donations. And if you like what you see, please like us and subscribe. And on our website at reasonandbalance.com, we do have a donations page where we do accept donations to help us make these videos. So any help that you can give us would be greatly appreciated. I am doing this video because I was reading a very excellent article, and let's see if I can find it here, by a lady by the name of Leah Littman. She works for NBC News, and she wrote an article called "The Sixth Amendment is in Danger. Will the Supreme Court Save It?" And she makes some very, very interesting observations. Oh, incidentally, today is December the 8th, 2020. Yeah, December the 8th, 2021, and I guess that's the date of her article. Anyway, she points out on there that this age-old problem that's very tied in to what I've written about in my book, Law, Lawyers, in Your Case, a dollars and cents examination. And I've also posted a few blog posts on reasonandbalance.com concerning this very important issue as well, and that is compensation for court-appointed attorneys. She points out in her excellent article, I can find it here, that since 1973, there have been 186 death sentence defendants who are known to have been wrongfully convicted. In other words, That's 186 people that were either wrongfully put to death, or thank God it was discovered before they were put to death that the conviction was wrongful, and they were thus thankfully spared. If you think about it, that's almost 4 death convictions per year that are wrong. Now, I'm not here to argue the death penalty, the merits of whether we should have the death penalty or not in this video. But that's a startling statistic, and this is pointed out in conjunction with what her article, which is the ineffective assistance of legal counsel. And this goes to how much court-appointed counsel gets paid. Now, I am in Richmond, Virginia, and I haven't actually looked at this lately in terms of what other states are doing, but for the last 20 or 30 years, Virginia has either been next to last or dead last in terms of what it pays court-appointed counsel. And it just so happens that I have here for your review, this is the statute from the Code of Virginia. It talks about compensation, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details, but basically for misdemeanors, the lawyer gets, representing an indigent defendant, gets paid by the state $120. And for felonies, if it's a lesser felony, they get $445. This is per charge. And normally there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 charges. If it's a serious felony, and I'm going to exclude, just to keep things simple, death penalty cases here, okay? But if it's a serious, like, for example, kidnapping or something like that, or armed robbery or something like that, where you can get more than 20 years, you get $1,235. Now, we're going to talk about, now there is a provision in the code section for waiver if you say you've spent X number, a lot of hours, and you ask the judge for more money, where they can grant it. Now, I will just tell you this. I don't know what the practice is right now. I'm going to soon find out, but I'm going to start to do some of this again. But when I last did any of this, you could request more money, but it was never granted. Okay, and let me just say, and going to the point, I'll just put them up here because I don't want to mislead anybody. Let me reemphasize, there are provisions for extending the amount that these folks get, like $850 in addition to the $1,235 for, these are serious felonies where the period of confinement is more than 20 years. For lesser felony offenses, in other words, where they can get less than 20 years, you can get the fee is $445, but they can grant up to an additional $155, and the same is true in misdemeanor cases. They can give you $120 plus another $120. Now these are called waivers. When they grant these extra fees, they're called waivers. But here is the major problem, and this is why they're hardly ever granted, because everything depends on appropriations. They're called waivers. And when the money runs out, and this especially occurs at the end of the fiscal year, you're never going to get paid any of those additional fees. But even so, those are caps, okay? And I will just tell you, like I said, I'm about to find out again, but when I did a lot of this type of work several years ago, these waivers were hardly ever granted. So basically, you were, as a practical matter, stuck with the original amounts here, the 120s, the 445 and the 1235. But anyway, see if you want to, here it is. There's the golden language right there that I've highlighted. And the last time I asked another lawyer about this that does do this kind of stuff, they said that hasn't changed. No, but I don't know for sure. So anyway, but those are the fees. So, and that, what I'm saying is that's actually what you get. Okay. There's the code section 19.2-163 to check it out. There's a lot of gobbledygook in the statute, but those numbers are pretty much it. And so anyway, and there's Miss Littman again. Let's see here. Let's go over here. Now, I took those fees, okay, and I tried to make a little bit of a chart here. Now, the UVA, University of Virginia, head football coach, he just either resigned or was let go or whatever, but he was making $3.4 million per year. Okay, that's per year. Now, how much legal representation would that buy if those monies were appropriated by the state to pay for the representation of indigent criminal defendants instead of to the football coach? Well, if we're talking about one count misdemeanor cases where the fee is $120, that's the total fee, incidentally. That's it, period. That would pay for 28,333 cases a year. For misdemeanor cases, it's not that unusual for there to be 3 misdemeanor charges. I mean, when I did it, it seemed like that, you could pretty often count on there being 2 or 3 charges. Well, I assume if there's 3 of them, that's going to pay for 9,444 cases. Now, if it's a lesser felony, one that gets less than 20 years of imprisonment in jail or the penitentiary, you get paid $445. If you get 2 counts of a lesser felony, you add those together, that's $890. That pays for those cases right there. Basically about 7,600 cases and 3,800 cases, depending on it's 1 or 2 counts. And in the serious felonies, now we're talking about rape, we're talking here armed robbery, we're talking mean stuff here. I mean, the people that the kind of cases that make the newspapers. That pays for 2,700 cases per year, and if there's 2 counts, about 1,300 cases per year. That's a lot of representation. Now, just think about that. I mean, that's a huge chunk of the entire criminal docket statewide of those types of cases. I'd have to do those numbers and calculate them out further, but it just goes to show you the misplaced priorities of society generally. The Constitution matters, folks. And if people aren't getting effective representation, our rights will be eroded. In her article, Ms. Littman's article, she's talking about how the Sixth Amendment, the right to effective assistance of counsel, is being eroded. I don't want to lengthen this video any longer than it needs to be, but it goes hand in hand here with the question of what you're paying, and I'm going to try to show you why that may be the case. You got to remember the lawyer's got to cover his costs and expenses. Now think about that $120 fee, okay, for a simple misdemeanor case. And I'm talking about, when I'm talking about misdemeanor case, I'm talking about cases, they don't appoint counsel unless there's the possibility of jail time. Okay, I mean actual incarceration. So, just slap on the wrist cases, they don't appoint lawyers for that. So if a lawyer, let's say on a assault and battery where somebody might go to jail for a year, as a practical matter, I'm not going to get into all that. But you got to remember, for that $120 that lawyer is going to spend, he's got to pay his rent, his utilities, his secretary. He's got to pay for gas to and from the court, etc. He's got to pay for his supplies, his insurance, tolls, parking, etc., etc., etc. What's left over, the lawyer gets. Now consider this: the lawyer must put into the case. He's got to talk to the defendant. Now, let me tell you something. If you can do it in less than 20 minutes, I mean, that would be the simplest of the simple of the no type of case. I mean, it's not unusual to get into a consultation with somebody where you talk for an hour, okay? But you got to do a thorough initial consultation to figure out whether any motions have to be filed and things of that nature. Then you got to travel to and from the court. And if you've got an incarcerated defendant, if the guy's being held pending trial, you got to go to the jail to meet with them. How much time do you have to wait for the case to be called once you're even at the courthouse? Then you've got to take time to talk to witnesses, the police, and to the prosecutor if you're going to do a plea deal. In felony cases, if there's going to be a jury trial, they take a ton of time. You got to prepare jury instructions, and you got to go through jury selection, jury deliberation. I've never had a jury trial personally that ever lasted less than a day. Now, some lawyers have done them in less than a day, but it is really tough. Opening and closing arguments. Felonies may well require 3 or 4 hearings. Would have preliminary hearing to determine probable cause. Then you may have preliminary motions to suppress. Then you may have the trial itself. And then if you lose, which let's face it, most of the time you're probably going to lose. I mean, you might, normally, realistically, most of the time what you're dealing with is you're trying to eliminate the most serious charges and trying to get as little jail time as possible. But anyway, what I'm saying is a lot of the times, probably most of the time, you're going to have to go back for sentencing, run the sentencing guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. And that takes a ton of time. So for felonies, the lawyer can pretty much assume that he's going to have to go to court 3 or 4 times. Yes. For misdemeanors, it's difficult to handle a case start to finish in less than 6 hours. And man, that's tough. That's tough, really. So you got to remember that. And if you figure that if it takes you 8 hours to handle that misdemeanor case, okay, that single count misdemeanor case, and your fee is $120. If you divide 8 into 120, that's $15 an hour. And that's your gross receipts. You've got to pay your secretary for your gas and all those expenses that I mentioned out of your $15 an hour. Now, if you don't think that this doesn't affect, the amount of time, effort, and energy the lawyer can put into a court-appointed case, you may want to think again. It has a huge effect, and Miss in the article that I'm referring to, she makes some great legal arguments about some of the hurdles that people who even contest the ineffective assistance of counsel. They say, "Hey, I got convicted, but I didn't have a good lawyer." The difficulties they have in getting their case heard. And believe me, it is very, very, very difficult under those circumstances to do habeas corpus or whatever. I mean, the courts are inundated with those petitions. And so I will tell you, I've been involved. I was counsel in a rape and an abduction case one time, and guy faced life imprisonment. And I'm not blowing smoke here. During the course of the trial, I was very uncertain in my own mind whether he was guilty or innocent. Really, I'm being serious. And I always fight regardless. Like, I've got to put my client first and do the best I can for him. But you talk about feeling really a lot of pressure in that situation where you're, especially if you really think that your guy is really genuinely interested on a rape charge, a rape and abduction charge where he could spend the rest of his life in jail, and you know that the evidence is close. That is a lot of pressure, sleepless nights to boot, and all that kind of stuff. And when I look at that $1,200 that I got, well, I mean, believe me, it didn't even remotely. I mean, the jury trial lasted all day and well into the night. And that $1,200 did not remotely cover all the pretrial preparation motions regarding the lineup, several pretrial motions that we fought about because there was another incident involving this particular client, and there was a question of whether that evidence was going to be admissible in this case. There were a ton of issues in that case. Anyway, it can be very pressure cooker type of situation for criminal defense attorneys. Okay, to try to put all this in perspective, we were talking about the head coach, football coach at UVA, $3.4 million, and what that would buy. But if you take these figures, the amount that the statute that we described earlier allows for court-appointed attorneys, and if you assume that these are the hours that across here that it takes to complete a case. And remember, these fees are gross figures. They're not net. That's not profit because the lawyer has to cover, all of these things right here out of these monies. So that is not net by any stretch of the imagination. So, and you can see that if he gets 100, and right here, these misdemeanors, that's where the vast majority of work is done. But these are like assault and battery cases, shoplifting, maybe a simple possession of an illegal drug, a minor amount, things of that nature. But that, or driving unsuspended, or reckless driving, or drunk driving, that's all this stuff right up here, okay? They're misdemeanors, and they appoint you if there's a possibility of a jail sentence. Now, for misdemeanors, you can serve up to 1 year. Anyway, as you can see, $120. If you spend 6 hours on the case, that comes out to $20 per hour. And you got to pay all of your expenses out of that, that I mentioned. If you spend 12 hours in the case, you're only making $10 an hour. That probably, this figure right here probably doesn't even cover your expenses, is my guess. Anyway, and down here for these felonies, I mean, if the thing of it is I note here 6 hours, but I say that scenario is highly unlikely. To complete a felony case in 6 hours there would have to be almost an immediate plea agreement, and you'd have to live really near the courthouse. And there so many things are going your way. 8 hours would still be tough because remember, you got to meet with the client, and he may be in jail. You may have to go to the jailhouse to interview him, talk to witnesses, the police officer, on and on and on. If you complete the case in 12 hours, you're making $37 an hour, and out of that, that's what you're grossing. You got to pay your expenses out of that. And so here are all the figures. Now, some of these fees like that looks, like I said, the problem is $205 an hour. Well, it's really tough to do a case in 6 hours. And you just don't seriously get that many of these cases right here. I guess, thank goodness. If you do it in 8 hours, it's 154. 12 hours. Now, let me just say, 12 hours is sort of a good number for one simple reason. If you assume 4 hours, and if you assume that normally you're going to show up 3 times, and sometimes you're going to show up 4, whatever, 12 hours, right here with 12 hours, you're beginning to talk about what is perhaps a more realistic figure. It's probably even a little more than 12 hours. But if it's 32 hours, okay, well, I don't want to mess up. But that's 32 hours. If you spend 32 hours, that's not going to work. I don't know why you did that. All right. If you spend 32 hours on a felony case, you're only making $14 an hour, out of which you've got to pay for your expenses. And anyway, so you see these figures, and these serious felonies, remember, that's the person is facing, he may be facing life imprisonment if it's a rape case, but more than 20 years. And you can see down here with that, you're grossing. That's not net, that's gross. And it is gross. But anyway, now let me just say this. Let's put this in perspective. And there's a reason for these numbers. To handle private clients, not court-appointed work, in Central Virginia, these are typical hourly rates, anywhere from $150 an hour to $350 per hour. And large firms can even be more than this, $350 per hour. And there's a reason for that. Practice of law is a lot more expensive than people think it is to handle it on an hourly basis. And to show you just how disproportionate everything is, regardless of the kind of the case, I think this is still the rule. I haven't done federal court-appointed work in about, now when I did it, this figure I think was $75 an hour. They get paid $155 an hour regardless of what kind of charge. I mean, this kind of stuff here wouldn't happen at all. As you can see, for the vast majority of these situations, you come out way, way, way ahead in the federal system handling indigent court-appointed cases than you do in the Virginia state system. So I guess what we're saying here is that there's a big reason that poor folks get many times ineffective assistance of counsel, which creates constitutional problems because the United States Constitution entitles someone to the effective assistance of counsel. But there's a reason for it, and a lot of it has to do with simple dollars and cents. But the point that the real reason why this fee schedule that I'm talking about has been in effect in Virginia, basically unchanged for about 30 years at least, maybe 40 now. I mean, a long time. And the legislature keeps, about once ever in a blue moon, they say they're going to do something about it. In the end, they really don't. And since they're obviously not going to do something about it, why not do something like have the athletic boosters that are paying the fat cats that are paying these, and or the state itself, have people that support, or I'm just not talking about athletic boosters. I'm talking about people in that socioeconomic category. Give them a tax deduction or tax credit for any contributions they made to a fund specifically established by the state to help pay for indigent defense. I mean, at least under those circumstances, if you gave the lawyers a little more money, you wouldn't be running this risk of having people wrongfully convicted of murder, wrongfully convicted of rape, wrongfully convicted of this, that, or the other thing, and there would be more justice in our system, and we can sleep better at night knowing that our system of criminal justice is fairer.
Dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da 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 dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da 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 dum dum